And what today is the 26th of September 2023. As always, let me see if we get some signal here. Okay, let me see if we can get some signal. Okay. I sure hope you can hear me now. Can you hear me? Please give me the thumbs up if you can hear me loud and clear as we begin the show tonight. Okay, folks, as always, Father God, want to give you praise. Want to say a big thank you. Want to glorify your name. Want to magnify your name. Thank you for what you've done and continue to do for us. With that said, some call him the mastermind, the doctor of love, the medicine of the microphone, the broadcast commissioner, Africa's media dobido extraordinaire. Bodo blai pare ko yo bodo si, jere situ pa yege, jebon blow that and ko me ochire ji to dry adi wapo. He doesn't eat iron, but he's definitely stronger than a lion. As for the giant, the now you know me Garlet. Welcome to the show. Mrs. Lexi Brooks Roberts, hello. Yo. Okay.
Yo, good evening.
It's funny.
Dr. James T. Fisk, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashford. And let me just take the time off to also welcome other panelists who are present and will be coming. And I want to take the time to invite people in listening and viewing land to yet another explosive episode of Bridge Radio Africa of ASHFORD GARLEY Live. Thank you.
The Reverend Dr. George.
Well, thank you, Ashford, for having me. It's a pleasure for these discussions. And like our doctor, there, I do like to welcome all of our panelists. Thank you for your time. We are having a great exchange, and we also understand it's for the Liberian people who are preparing to go to the polls. So we want to thank you for your time always. And our listening audience, we are here to make our cases for our candidates to help you make the best choice that we believe will liberate Liberia finally. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Liberia's hottest political enthusiast, the Reverend Idatus Added. Hello and welcome to the show.
Greetings to all of you. Greetings to all of my brothers and sisters watching in the diaspora, Liberia at large. We give God the glory. It's a pleasure one more time to be seated with such esteemed panelists, as well with you, Ashford the Giant Garley, the medicine of the microphone. God bless.
Well, tonight we play host to a very special guest. He works at the John Hopkins Hospital. He's the former assistant health minister, former deputy chief medical officer of Liberia, and incident manager during the Ebola era in Liberia. The name is Dr. Tobert Yunsua. Tobert Yunsua shortly will join us in our studio where we'll talk about the current electoral process in Liberia. We'll also talk about his take whether or not George Weah deserves a second 6 years term. And he will also tell us about his newly published book. So we'll have a lot to talk about tonight. But ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with Reverend George. With 14 days to elections, we witnessed a press conference today from the chair of the National Elections Commission, Mrs. Henrietta Brown Lansana, where she said that in a few days the voter roll will be published, and she also said that jingles, the awareness is going on all of the media institutions in Liberia. Something people disputed. They said they have not heard jingles. They have not heard any awareness about the forthcoming elections in Liberia. What is your take, Reverend George?
Well, thank you for having me once again. This is a situation that we're trying to remediate in the hopefully in the Cummings administration. Look, we have a situation where the president of Liberia select the major referee of our electoral process, the election commission, selected by the president of Liberia, and the president is running for office. You can see, for me, you can see the conflict there. I listened the other day, there was a charge that the FRR was supposed to be out 30 days to elections, and it has not been put out there. So these are all signals of either malpractices or laziness, if I would say, or intentionally something in the making. So again, it's not satisfactory to say we have few days to election and the FRR is not out, and she is still playing politics with it. The last press conference I listened to, the chairperson, she was saying that there is no such law that require the FRR to be out 30 days to election. Of course, there is a regulation for that. So we take serious exception to recent developments from the Election Commission, which really are fueling the whole narrative of something Fiji, don't try it from the other camp, do this, if you try this, you're happy. It is because of what they are doing. So we want Liberian people to take note of that. If nothing is happening and she is clinging to the word that something is happening, then it's very troubling. And we take exception to that, whether you are opposition or you are what opposition. Everybody taking part in this election should be very keen to the fact that we want free and fair
Thank
elections. Thank you.
you. Idatus added.
Yes. Well, yeah, certainly, man. It's quite some challenging times, and that is why when the census were being conducted, we saw a lot of irregularities and we saw a lot of discrepancies for that matter. And that is why the Honorable Alexander Cummings took the case to the Supreme Court. I would say you've conducted census, but you haven't been able to tell us who all are voting from Congotown, Sincor, Old Road, among several other places in the country. He had a very legitimate case, took that to the court, and he lost. And then we see again the NEC has been underfunded by this government, not to mention the fact that the NEC is currently using its apparatus to sort of hang up the president's placards. So a lot of these irregularities confounded and compounded with the fact that the Unity Party filed a lawsuit today called the writ of Madamus. The writ of Madamus, for those who don't know legally, is the writ that compels a government agency to perform its function per the law. And what is that function per the law? NEC is supposed to provide political parties with the voters' roll registration roll, the final registrations roll. So we are waiting to hear from the Supreme Court to see what they have to say. It is under these clouds of discrepancies that are fueling, quite frankly, Liberians' suspicion about whether or not we'll have a free, fair, and transparent elections. And it's a very serious matter because we don't want a constitutional crisis, a postponement of elections. We don't want Liberia to degenerate in a place where political parties are uncomfortable with the results. We want to be credible. When you look at the Afro barometer, as I conclude, the Afro
Thank you.
barometer, you would see
Thumbs
that
up.
our confidence in our election commission at this time from 2018 has dropped by 10%.
Thank you
So
very
it's a
much.
very serious thing. We are very poised of the consequential elections that must not be overlooked. Thank you.
Thank you. I will hear from Dr. Fisk, then Mrs. Roberts, because our guest is backstage now. In a moment from now, we will have him shoot up on the live screen. Dr. Fisk.
Ashwa, you're sounding very low. I don't know if it's my phone. Am I the only one?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
No,
Much
he's very
better.
clear.
It's
Can you
very
hear
clear.
me
Yeah,
now?
he's fine. You
Is it
sound
better
fine.
now? Okay.
You're fine.
Good.
Maybe his
Okay.
device. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Fisk.
Well, the thing is, the numbers don't lie. In 2017, the voting population of Liberia, in other words, those who actually cast ballot, was 1.6, a little over 1.6 million. Currently, there has been a registration of 2.4 million people. Okay, and during the last election, George Weah first round won by at least about 38% of the vote. What are the possibilities that he's going to come and win 60% first round or 51.1%? I don't see that, given his significant unpopularity and the fact that other candidates have become popular at the expense of his inability to perform. So, I mean, the thing is, like I said, the numbers don't lie. Okay, and like what Reverend George talked about, you can be a player and referee at the same time. So there are a number of systemic problems that need to be resolved. Okay, some of which include making sure that whoever is selected to be heading the Electoral Commission of Liberia, which is central to the democracy, stable democracy of the country, is someone who's impartial. Okay, and what's the relevance of having to file all of these lawsuits? Long story short, if we end up with a situation where the person who remains after October 10 is not the person who reflects the popular mandate of the people, what you are doing, you are asking for trouble. The reason why there was an overthrow in Guinea is because the president wanted to perpetuate his ability to remain in office. Okay, it's just another variant of trying to manipulate democracy. And I mean, if it was not allowed in other countries and ECOWAS spoke against it, I'm not sure how that's going to be allowed in Liberia. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Roberts, you want to chime in or you want to wait till.
Yes, I can chime in. I want to say good evening to all of you. Welcome to another edition of Bridge Radio Africa with your host, Ashford, the Giant Garley. I want to say to our people, yo. Liberia is for all of yo. Not some of yo. All of yo. Don't let anybody take your rights and responsibility away from you because they're not following their responsibilities. As at 2 weeks to elections and we still have all of this riff raft going on, there is something sinister about that. So you pay attention. Liberia is for all of you, not some of you, for all of us, in fact, even those of us in the diaspora. We have the right to say what is right and what is wrong. Your vote is your voice. Let your voice be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let us set the tone tonight as we introduce our special guest tonight. Uh, when you're asking or engaging, uh, asking about how he feels about your candidate, whether you're supporting the Brunskin, you're supporting a boycott, and he knows about Liberia and he knows about Liberian politics. He has just launched a new book. We're asking about his book. But first, we want to engage him about the upcoming elections. What are his thoughts? What he thinks about the elections? And at this time, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to give him 2 minutes to introduce himself. And when you have questions for him, it will take him 2 minutes to answer the question. If there's a follow up, we'll give him additional 1 minute to answer that question. At this time, please join me as we introduce to you Dr. Tolbert Yunswat. Dr. Yunswat, good evening and welcome to Bridge Radio.
Uh, Thank you, ASHFORD Garley, Giant, and fellow panelists. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
The last time you appeared on this show was in 2020, and this is your home. It feels great having you back again.
It's a pleasure, as always.
Well, there are a lot of folks who may have heard the name Tolbert Yunswat, but don't really know anything about Tolbert Yunswat. Please take time out to tell us a little bit about yourself.
That's one of the difficult part about that. I thought you were going to do it, actually, but that's fine. I'm Tolbert Yunswat, a Liberian professional. I'm a lawyer by training and a health specialist in the field of public health. Work in the Ministry of Health of Liberia from KD, what they call KD, and secretary. I joined the ministry in 1999. After spending some of my life in refugee camp in Cote d'Ivoire, graduated from high school. Refugee high school was sponsored by the ADRA. They called it ADRA Taboo 2 at the time in Ivory Coast. In 1997, after the election, repatriated myself to Liberia through the aid of UNHCR and joined the Ministry of Health as a cadet. And went to the University of Liberia, got a Bachelor of Science degree in biology and chemistry, went to law school, became lawyer, practiced law in Liberia, became counselor at law, and then came to the United States, where I got a master's degree in public health from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Went back to Liberia, appointed after rose through different positions, KD secretary, became director, deputy director of the National Malaria Control Program for 9 years. Came to the US after my study, went back, got appointed by President Sirleaf as Assistant Minister of Health. I headed the Bureau of Disease Prevention as Deputy Chief Medical Officer of Liberia. When the Ebola crisis came, when you heard the name Tolbert Yunswat, this is the same person who headed the Ebola crisis and brought the situation under control. When the world said 200,000 Liberian people were going to die, we cut that number down to 4,000 people. Those that, it's sad to say about that. But over 4,000 died. And now completed a doctorate degree and wrote a book about the Ebola situation and my lifestyle. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, let us just jump straight into this, beginning with the elections in Liberia. Tell us the current state of the nation, whether the CDC and where deserve the second 6 years term. I'll give you 2 minutes to respond, and then the panelists in the room can come in.
I feel very terrible about our country. I think Liberia is in a very precarious situation in the last couple of years. Things are moving down spiral, and every Liberian should not be proud of their country right now. The reason I say that the data is clear about international organizations like Transparency International, where corruption is on the increase. Liberia have been falling down the line since 2018, when Liberia was even at least doing well. 132 countries out of 180 has gone up to 142 right now out of 180 countries that were assessed just recently in the 2022 report. The only country in the region, if you take the ranking 2022 with Togo is about 130, they're doing better than us. Sierra Leone is 110 out of 180, doing better than us. Gambia is 110. Cote d'Ivoire is 99. Ghana is 72. Liberia, by the ranking, is 142 by 180 by Transparency International ranking. And since the CDC government came to power, Liberia has been falling into the Transparency International report. That's one reason why, and so the country is labeled as one of the corrupt countries that we can think about in our region, as per the Transparency Barometer. Not me saying that. Another issue is the practice the government does must discourage investors to coming into the country, according to the 2023 investment climate sentiments that government officials are receiving bribes. They don't promote investors to come into the country. You also know about the Human Development Index report about racial killing, human trafficking, and all of that.
I'll hold
So,
you to that. I'll hold you. You can
government-
continue. You can continue when these guys begin to ask the questions. Let me bring in Dr. James T. Fisk, who happens to be a media professional by practice and school. He's also a doctor, a DNP, to weigh in, and then I'll bring in the rest of the guys. Dr. Fisk.
Welcome again to the program, Bridge Radio, Dr. Yensua. It's not necessarily a question, but just an observation, because George Weah keeps talking about winning the elections in one term. And I said yesterday, and I'll continue to hammer that message home, that George Weah needs to be given a red card. Okay. It's up to Liberians to give George Weah a red card, especially those who consider themselves to be in the opposition. And I've said, and I will use this platform tonight to advocate this, that no one is going to win first round in Liberia. Okay. The last time we'll look at the numbers, George Weah first round, he won 38%, Boyka won 28%, and Cummings was a little over 7%. So if we assume that because of the campaigning that Cummings has gained a little more traction, we're looking at anywhere between 10 to 14%. If we do the same thing for Boyka, we're looking at something at least 42%, and Weah would be a little over. Well, with Weah, he was at his peak when he won, theoretically. Otherwise, he would not have won. So you cannot go beyond your peak, right? Then you start to come down. So we can assume that the 38% is a number he may not be able to hold. The current 2023 census for those who will be voting is 2.4 million. And we know that there are 4 counties that are big as far as the numbers, even in 2023. And those are Monserrado, Nema, Bong, and the Bassa Belt. So help us understand, why is it Mr. Weah keeps making all this noise about first round victory and the rest of it, even though the numbers don't seem to add up? Thank you.
No, thank you. If you were to go back to historical facts, as you stated, and as a statistician myself, if you go by the data, then it tells you with 20 some more, I think about 20 candidates in the race, it makes it impossible based on the data, regional disparities, and people having strongholds in other areas. It makes it a bit difficult for, during the heydays of Mr. Weah, when everyone thought that he would have ran the country to the best of his ability. As a man who loved the country, he could not pass 38% of the vote. It makes it very, very difficult. If you were to even talk about anyone who will win first round, then it should be the opposition, because you have to show your record when you are an incumbent to win election landslide, unless something out of the ordinary happens, which I have spoken out on different channels about the way NEC is proceeding, about the secrecy in the final register road, about lack of information to the population of our country, disinformation, misinformation, rumors taking hold of the electoral process. Yesterday, is in Liberia yesterday now, which was this morning when I listened to the press conference of the Election Commission. She could not even call the total number of people referring to other people. That tells you that the National Election Commission has a lot of work to do. The head of the commission have to go in there, sit in the data room, and get herself on top of the game. As it is now, I don't think she's fit into monitoring what is going on in the commission by referring to other people, especially simple data. She can't get it. She doesn't know when the voter roll will be published. When the Supreme Court, I've heard in 2017 that the voter roll should be fully clean. The NEC has also been ordered to conduct a full cleanup of the FRR to have it. And so those are the critical things that we should be looking at. Those
Thank
things,
you.
yeah.
Thank you. Let me bring in a supporter of Ambassador Joseph Yamaboyka, the Reverend Idatus Ade. Reverend Ade?
Well, thank you. First of all, I sincerely want to commend you, Dr. Yinswa, for the pivotal role you played in helping to address our Ebola crisis. I also want to sincerely commend you the other night when you encouraged Liberians to make a decision between 4 great candidates. And one of those candidates you mentioned was Joseph Imamboyka, who you personally worked with. I'd like you to please tell the public the relationship in your work professionally and some of the accomplishments, having been able to have worked under his direct supervision in managing the Ebola crisis, especially under the One Health program with GC and Prevail. Thank you.
And Dr. Yusuf will give you 2 minutes to respond if the time it is the need, and maybe in the next the phase of your comment in you can proceed. But go ahead now.
The technical people, electors added, the technical people thrive when there's a good leadership. That's how we technicians, that's how we make progress. That's how we deliver the goods. For us to deal with one of the difficult crises in human history, the largest Ebola situation in the world ever, was what happened in Liberia when we dealt with it. If we didn't have a stable leadership, 200,000 Liberians would have died and 1 million people would have been affected. There's a One Health program that we're talking about, a regional disease surveillance program, almost 100 million in the 3 most affected countries. Ambassador Boaka was the captain of that ship for the One Health program. That's one of the things I watch him very steadily, a steady person who painstakingly look up to details. Number 2, there was government money of $10 million that were lingering in the budget that could not be implemented for youth empowerment. And President Selly did ask Ambassador Boakai to play a leadership role in getting the young people to work. At the time, Eugene Lambe today, who's the campaign manager for Mr. Ware, was the guy who was at the helm of authority at the Ministry of Youth and Sport. He and Minister Tonela Vapla has just changed hand the ministry, and Mr. Vice President, His Excellency, make sure that project was implemented. The only Ebola vaccines that we have in the world today was spearheaded when there was an impasse to have that trial, was under the leadership of Ambassador Boakai. ELW Hospital. If you go to Liberia, there was a small ELW hospital. Today, there's a large ELW hospital under Samaritan Purse. It was under Ambassador Boakai negotiation that enlarging ELW hospital.
And I hold you right there.
Ashford, hold on 1 minute. The last thing I would name before going was the JFK that is being boasted about today, MRI machine, CT scan, and all of that. There was an electricity farm with generator that through the Prevail multi-million-dollar enterprise project that Ambassador Boakai had. And this is where you look at people, their past record, and say, look, this person will do something in the future. That's how me I judge people.
Thank you. Idatus, do you have a follow-up question? Because you're entitled to 2 questions. So,
yes. So, when you look at Liberia where it is now, and you said we're in a very terrible state, if the past indicator is the best, I mean, if past performance is the best indicator for future performance, what grade would you give Ambassador Boyka, having worked with him personally in the context of the discharge of his duties, the wisdom impacted, the ability to empower people to function expertly and judiciously on the scale of, what grade would you give him, A to F?
Look, if I were to set benchmarks, and some of them I'll talk about, for me, I'm an MAE person, monitoring evaluation, and for you to score something, you must give a score first and monitor it over time, those indicators, and look at them. And those that I have named to you, and others that some people have spoken about. This guy is in the upper 90 percentage, upper 90 percentage. No one is 100%. So, I will give him an A from what he have done, I believe. Now, let me tell you something in leadership. In leadership, you can get all the excellent ideas, everything you want to do. If you have if you are beneath someone and you are not the person in charge, like the captain who flies or the pilot who flies the plane or the captain who moves in the ship, I don't care how good you are under the instruction of someone. These dedication that President Selig gave him, the way he performed them, and those projects become fruition. Like I told you about the JFK project, it's a multi-million-dollar enterprise. As we speak today, for those of you in Liberia, go and ask for the Prevail project. It was Ambassador Boakai's leadership that brought it there. Millions and millions of dollars that JFK is benefiting from and research across the country. So if you put him as a captain of the ship, I believe Liberia will have a steady hand. And if he brings in, and let me say the caveat, he wasn't the one implementing these things. We, the people, were doing that. But the fact that he was in charge of ministers of governments and were performing some of the functions shows me that he's someone to have the confidence in terms of leadership.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you, sir.
Reverend George, people would say, don't listen to what it said, just watch what it do. Well, you've heard Ambassador Boyka himself said he was a park race car for 12 years. And he went further to say his hands were tied. He was in a position where he advised the president. It is left with the president whether or not for her to listen. But yeah, you have the technocrats, those who were actually working, are speaking on his behalf. Someone said, is Dr. Yunsua looking for a job? He wants to be the next of health minister, or he want to be the next chief medical officer. We don't know these things. What do you have to say to Dr. Yunsua, the fact that he has outlined all of these things under the watchful eyes of Ambassador Boyka?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you, Dr. Nyiswa, for your amiable contribution to Liberia, whether, during the time you were serving, the Ebola, and even now. I want to thank you so much for that. And what I will say, though, the Ebola crisis brought some things out of Liberian abroad and at home. And one of the persons I believe who contributed to that Ebola crisis was Mr. Benedict Cummins Jr., Alexander Benedict Cummins Jr. He contributed. So, yes, you admitted you are a technocrat and you had this managerial leadership, if you will, that was spearheaded by Ambassador Boakai. But I will say this, though, as a technocrat, you know that resources are put into a program to make it successful. I will have time to talk about the managerial leadership of Mr. Cummins, who I support. I'm a CPP member, for the record. But tell us, without the goodwill, we all know that the goodwill of Liberians and international community are rallying around to attack the whole Ebola crisis. I believe all of that is a sum total that made your job effective and resourceful as you can recount today. So I want to thank you for that. And that's how I would say. I'm not going to delve into that in terms of promoting Ambassador Boakai. I will come back later because I know Ambassador Boakai had 12 years. So if just one event of the 12 years that you are giving us as a barometer as Liberian to use and judge Ambassador Boakai, for me will not be enough. We're going to look at the entire 12 year what he did and how when he was questioned by media about his performance, how he um, said that he was a parked car. We'll go into that.
Thank you.
But thank you for your performance and thank you for helping Liberians during that deadly Ebola crisis.
Thank you.
ASHFORD, let me clarify something. If I were looking for a job or leadership position in Liberia, I would have remained in the Weah's government like other people in the CDC. When Mr. Weah came to power, I spent 22 months in his government as Director General of the National Public Health Institute. I had a very good car. There was money, almost $100 million that I raised, donor money to build projects. There were ongoing projects when he came to power. I had almost 300 men across the country, and I resigned from that job. So I'm not looking for a job. Today, I think I'm better off with what I do right now with the international community. So coming here is in the interest of the country. I don't have to do it for anything. But I'm giving Liberians the opportunity to read between where we were, that's why I'm here, and we go into the elections so that Liberian can listen to people like us who have integrity, that people respect and people follow, to tell them that Liberia is more than wanting a position. I left Liberia almost 4 years now. When I left Liberia, everything I worked for in 20 years, I left it in Liberia. So God blessed me. I have resources. I'm working, being here. This is not about promoting a candidate. And Reverend Josh, Mr. Cummings, I didn't know him during the Ebola crisis. And he was not alone. The international community, private Liberians, gave resources with the Ebola program. I know Lima Bowie raised money. I understand Mr. Cummings raised some money to do some work. They were private Liberians. FIFA gave some people money the way they use it. So a lot of people work in the Ebola crisis. But to speak a little bit even about your candidate, ASHFORD, give me a few seconds.
I'll give you additional 30 seconds because you were responding to what I asked about how people are thinking. Go ahead.
Exactly. And your candidate recently, he has a good judgment as well. I didn't come here to promote. The one I should clarify is Mr. Weah should not go back in power. He's an existential threat and disaster for our country. That one I can say for sure. I've been worked there for 22 months in his government. Mr. Cummings, I believe he will also do a good job. The reason I say that, during the COVID-19 crisis, just recently in 2021, when Mr. Cummings wanted to support COVID-19 through a mutual friend, he did ask to speak with me, and Mr. Cummings called me in the United States to give him a plan that he wanted to support for COVID-19 in the country. I gave him a 7-page plan. He implemented that plan and provided resources. He got back to me, he said, the plan you gave me, I'm writing the government right now, but I want to state your name in that letter, that this is your idea, Mr. Yusuf. And I told him, don't do it, I don't want to get involved into that. And he told me, thank you for doing what I did. So I think someone like that will look for technocrat to help him in the future. You don't have to be me to do some work. So with COVID-19, I can bear that, yes, he gave some support because I was involved in that. But with Ebola, I did not hear about Mr. Cummings, and I didn't know what kind of support he gave. But it could be that he gave some support. Thank you, Ash.
Thank you. Let me bring in Dr. Fix now. He wanted to ask a follow-up question.
Yeah, in light of Dr. Yusuf, what Dr. Yusuf has been saying, I think I need to do a follow-up question because we know very well that this whole Ebola thing was not anything new on the continent of Africa. In fact, he would know that it started in the Congo region after the Ebola thing was manufactured in Belgium. He knows that. Okay, so by the time Ebola reached to the shores of Liberia, Ellingham ministers in government, what were they doing? Sleeping? Didn't they understand contact precaution and all of that? Weren't they health officials in the country? How come they sat down, allowed so many people to travel to the United States, come with Ebola, and didn't seem to understand the international repercussion? And then only in the final analysis, Liberia becomes the epicenter only because you had ministers that were very careless, who didn't pay attention to the data, who didn't seem to take the time to do the necessary research so that the Liberian public would be protected. The only reason why Liberia was saved is because Obama, through the United States of America, was able to step in. Otherwise, Liberia would have been a graveyard. So how do we come after the fact to say, okay, fine. After all of these people, they sat down, they let that stuff explode, and then we say, okay, fine, because America propped up Liberia once more, and then there was funds that could be used. They would say, oh, well, we give Joseph Boakai 90%. What was Joseph Boakai when that thing erupted? Why didn't he play that leadership role? Why did he have to wait for Ellen as a deputy president in Liberia? No, he did not. So I wouldn't go as far as giving him an A. A exactly for what? Do we lose track of the fact that so many people lost their lives needlessly in Liberia? Could you help me understand those things? Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, James, Dr. Faker, for that. Let's get the facts straight. Number one, West Africa was the first time dealing with Ebola. Number two, the outbreaks that have happened in DRC, Congo, and other countries since Ebola started in 1976 have been happening in rural areas. Number three, this was the first time that Ebola has entered urban area, three capitals of almost 28 million people, Conakry, Freetown, and Monrovia. Fact number four, our health system did not have the capacity to detect infectious disease like Ebola. So we didn't have the lab to detect it. We didn't have the resources to do that. Compare that with COVID-19 today. COVID-19 happened in Wuhan, China. It devastated the whole world and 50 million people died. The worst country was the United States. So diseases spread. Countries don't have the capacity. They don't have the leadership. So those at the time I was in charge from March of 2014, when I got in charge, it was in August already. Not that the capacity wasn't there, but we didn't have the resources. And fact number five, Obama does not stop Ebola in Liberia. And if you read my book, you will see that when they went in, they did a lot of work. U.S. provided a lot of the resources that stopped the outbreak. But when they went in some of the Ebola treatment unit that they built, they didn't receive one single patient. Liberian came together, the community came together, fought the disease. When the international euphoria came from Europe, China, US, Liberian themselves, when we worked together as the incident management system team. So to insinuate and say, this is what happened and what didn't happen, some infectious diseases, we call it novel pathogens, new diseases. For example, COVID-19 was one of them. The US struggled to put lab system in place, EU struggled, the whole world struggled. So Liberia was no exception to have been cut pens down, but we did what we could do.
Well, the thing is, okay, sorry for interrupting you, but
that's fine. That's fine.
At the 2 minutes, so let me just do a follow-up. The reason why people have bachelor's degrees, some have masters, and some have doctorates is because by the time your level of education reached a certain level, there's certain kind of expectations. Okay. So the reason why I say this is because what the research shows is that the reason why Ebola broke up in certain areas and they did not extend beyond those areas is because there was quarantine that occurred. I mean, you know that. Okay. So didn't the people do the research? That's my question. Why did Liberians have to die needlessly? That's the Ebola didn't break up in Montserrat. It did not. So why is it those who were principal ministers of government, including the vice president, couldn't take the necessary precaution to protect Liberians? Why did we have to wait for the West before taking the problem seriously? Why did we have to wait for the West before protecting, quarantining Liberians from traveling to the United States of America. So, it's easy for people who don't know the details to sit and say, oh, well, it makes sense that, okay, this is the first time. What? Africa is Africa. So if something happens, you want to be like, okay, is there a precedent for this thing? That's how researchers think. Okay, so why would a core of individuals be caught flat-footed when the research was there? The research showed where this thing started. The research showed how this thing could have been contained. But yet and still we waited until Liberians went to the United States, brought the Ebola, and with it, the stigma. Was it because we're trying to seek international funding from the United States of America at the expense of Liberian lives? So let's not say, oh, well, it happened in Central Africa and the first time. So the reason why it spread is because people did not observe quarantine. Those who are in the health area, they know about contact precaution. Contact precaution prevent these things from spreading. How come we ignored all of these things? And then we still want to give Mr. Joseph Waka over 90%? Seriously?
So thank you, Doc. In the first stage of the outbreak, you sounding exactly like the way Liberians were sounding that they were doing it to get money from the white people. That's the initial stage of the outbreak. That's why it overwhelmed the country. People were not taking precaution. There was fear, agitation. People did not believe that there was something called Ebola. They were accusing the government of raising money from the international community. So all the things that we were saying, people say we were lying, Ebola did not exist. That's why it permeated the society. When Liberians got to realize that, oh yes, this is something that we got to do to prevent ourselves, then the people came together, the community came together, and the community stopped the disease. So it's not white people and their money that stopped the disease. So then we put in contact tracing, the quarantine you're talking about. Then people started washing themselves, their hands. Liberians stopped touching each other. We were touching each other like they were airborne. People started putting hand washing buckets to their doors and all of that. When those measures started, then Ebola got under control. And spread of disease to other countries, and Liberian people who transported there. People were still, the borders were open, people could travel. There were all measures we put in place with border controls and all of that.
Let me just ask a quick question. Isn't there any epidemiologists in Liberia?
There were so many of them, but there were few. We did not have few epidemiologists in Liberia. There were only 2 epidemiologists. This is now why
we had one. They didn't decide to visit the research.
We had only 2 epidemiologists. We did not have few epidemiologists. We didn't have disease detectives. It was after the outbreak that we built lab system, put epidemiologists into place, train social workers, train contact tracers, and all of those systems were put in place. That's why COVID-19 did not devastate Liberia the way Ebola did. So you see now, now you get into the core of the issues. And when you read my book, it will give you explanation of exactly what happened in the inside story.
Well, folks, if you're just joining us, this is ASHFORD GARLEY Live on Brace Radio Africa. Tonight, as special guest, we have Dr. Torbert Yunsua. Just before we go to Mrs. Lexi Brooks Roberts.
And somebody just put on your live feed, Dr. Figure, that one of the sophisticated countries in the world is the United States. During COVID-19, the country with, in terms of per capita, the country with the highest mortality due to COVID is the United States. Because why? Americans were denying, they didn't want to wear masks. Some didn't want to take the vaccines. They didn't know what they call contact tracing. Some folks at the Johns Hopkins University, we developed the first contact tracing course that 1.3 million people took. All US 50 states were using the contact tracing course because Americans did not know about contact tracing. Google it right now. Johns Hopkins contact tracing course are one of those who did that.
Hold
on 1 minute, we can talk together. When the outbreak started here, the first test the United States developed failed. They couldn't test COVID when China and other countries were testing it. That's why most Americans died. So
and I will counter. I will counter by saying this: Americans did not die because of the lack of information. Information was out there. It's one thing to have information and choose to ignore information, People do it all the time. It has nothing to do with sophistication. But you know what happened to Liberia? People acted as if to say they were not educated because the research is out there. Even before Ebola came, I already knew about Ebola. That was years before. So my question is, aren't there epidemiologists in Liberia or weren't there? Or is it that people just got the degree and decided to just sit down on it? Because if people were if people were taking data into consideration and they had done the research to understand that, okay, this thing has happened in Africa before with devastating consequence because people did not observe contact precaution. A lot of people died until people came from abroad and decided to quarantine certain areas so it didn't spread into other areas. How can people miss all of that information as if to say it was non-existent until after COVID, until after Ebola? No, it was not non-existent before Ebola. It was not non-existent after Ebola. It was existent before Ebola. The information was there. People refuse to do the research. That's what I'm saying. The difference, there's expectation depending on the level of academics you have. So you can't tell me someone who have a doctorate and then
ASHFORD Garley, can I jump in there, please?
And decide. No, I'm coming. You said we don't talk together, and decide that Liberians will continue to die. If there's a system that's running, the president will make sure that the Ministry of Information has information from the Ministry of Health to be able to tell the Liberian people. So whether there's speculation or not, it doesn't mean to say the information is not available. The information was not available.
Thank you, Dr.
I'm saying that in the midst of all of that, how can you give Joseph Braga 90%? Applause. Seriously?
Thank you, Dr. Fisk. Dr. Yunsua, in addition to responding to him, I want to ask you this. You said that you are very comfortable in Liberia. As a matter of fact, you have over $100 million in the budget. Under your supervision, you have over 300 employees, and you served 22 months under George Weah's administration. Your name still remains in Liberia as the Ebola hero when it comes to putting into place things that people needed to save lives. What led to your departure from Liberia under George Weah's administration?
Now, that's a good one to answer. But I don't know Dr. Figures or Figures, if I get it right, orientation and whether he knows about disease.
His name is Dr. Fisk.
Okay, Dr. Fisk. Okay, whether he knows about disease prevention and control, because the reason I asked that is not to disparage you or so.
Or you can go and look at the DMP post online, and that will answer your question.
Please do not interrupt the guest.
Hold on.
Yeah, that will answer your question.
The whole region, the whole sub-region of Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, the International Community World Health Organization took from December to March, check it up, before the whole world got to know that what was taking place in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone was Ebola. Before WHO declared public health emergency of international concern, it was already August. 3,000 Liberians had died. So the whole world did not have the solution of what was taking place in West Africa when it happened. The records are there. It was only in Lyon, France, that we used to ride motorbike to take the specimen from Liberia to carry it to Guinea border to go to France and test. Liberia did not have the capacity. Sierra Leone did not have the capacity. Guinea did not have the capacity. The US there's something they call sequencing of the disease. The US CDC themselves had to put a system in place before they test and say, oh, what we're dealing with in West Africa is not Lassa fever, it is Ebola. So take some time and read about the evolution of the Ebola crisis, and you will get a lot of information. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Go to
your question.
Can I respond?
Great question.
Can I respond?
ASHFORD.
Hold on, Dr. Yunsua.
Okay.
Dr. we are not going to make this a dialogue between you and that.
No, but he said something that I needed to respond to.
I just understood that I want to participate as well.
Yeah, but it's true. But when he makes a statement, I need to respond to it, right?
Okay, I'll give you 30 seconds to respond. Go ahead.
Okay, fine. So let's reverse the situation and let's put it in the United States of America, or maybe let's put it in China. Do you think they will have waited for 90 days? Because stop interrupting me, Dr. Yiswa.
Okay,
but he's the guest. He's not a regular panelist.
No, but okay, so he can interrupt.
I'm not saying. I mean, you can watch the way you talk to him. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, no, that's what I'm saying, Dr. Yiswa. You can't interrupt.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the thing is, if you reverse the situation, you put it in America or you put it in China, would they be waiting for 6 months? Because you know that a situation don't move from, it doesn't wake up one morning and become a pandemic. Okay, there's, like you said, there's a sequence. Okay, so all I'm saying is this: the local experts on the ground needed to have alerted the international community. In other words, you guys needed to have taken, not you, I don't want to be personal, those experts needed to have taken the lead. Okay, because they did not take the lead. If you do the research on how these institutions get involved, it takes time because they have certain different levels of alerts. You know that. Okay, and the last time I checked when I did some courses at Georgetown, these are basic courses. Okay, and my DMP is in health. So I'm not trying to say what I don't know. Okay, this is why I'm questioning these things. That it is not possible that if you had a bunch of experts that were working, like how experts would be working in the States or in China or in Europe or something like that, that 3,000 librarians would have had to die before you had the international community. International community will only come after there is a significant alert and they're trying to prevent a pandemic. You know that. Thank you.
Ashford, can I come in here, Ashford?
I've been trying to come.
Dr. Yunsha will comment, then we'll go to Letty Boost Rappers. Please.
Ashford, you need a whole show.
You mean Reverend George?
You need a whole show for infectious disease transmission and everything. You need a whole show for that. When he said China and the US, my brother, the COVID-19 you're dealing with today came from a country called China.
We agree.
Up to now, the Chinese people and the whole world cannot tell you where the origin of COVID. It's still debatable. Even Congress having hearing about this. So when it happened in China, the Chinese didn't know that they were dealing with COVID-19. They went through sequencing. They went through genomic sequencing before they could know that, oh, we are dealing with influenza-like disease and flu. Before WHO even went there. So the US government, the recent China and Trump pulled out the United States from WHO was they blamed WHO of not alerting the United States and other countries early. So I'm still telling you, when there are novel pathogens, new diseases that the world does not know about, it takes time to develop the tests. It takes time to put a system in place to protect people, and the disease doesn't wait. That's why COVID-19 overwhelmed the whole world, became pandemic.
But we're talking about Ebola.
Hold on. You should be praising us in West Africa that Ebola did not turn to a pandemic and we stop it there. When they said millions of cases, 200,000 people are going to die, only 4,000 died, and we have only 28,000 cases from Ebola. Okay?
What's the essence of the word signs and symptoms?
Dr. Fish.
Signs and symptoms. What's the essence of that word?
Sorry?
What's the essence of the words of the phrase signs and symptoms? What's
signs and symptoms could be somebody coughing, somebody get fever, somebody toiling. It could be so many other diseases that present signs and symptoms, and you may not know a specific disease until you do a lot.
So at the end of the day, ruling out certain situations, you get to know, right? You get to zero in to know. So that's what I keep saying.
You can't do
the research people were not researching.
Dr. Fish, we can get in the back and allow you and Dr. Yunsha to get to the whole show tonight because there are others waiting that want to participate. It is not fair to the rest of the guys. Please. Okay. Thank you. Dr. Yunsha, you still have not answered why.
Yes, I still have not answered your question. Now, I got to know that the CDC government was not serious for business. And the reason why you see me here today, Ashford, that Mr. Garley and your panelists, that during this very crucial time of our country, consequential elections, that people like us can leave and roll our technical sleeves and sometimes talk about politics. It's the way our government and CDC that taught me that. I spent 12 years, even let's go back a little bit, 20 years, working in the health sector when I gave my TC statement here, my preamble of when I started working and all of that. When CDC came to power, is when they were even asking technicians which government you were working for, and my gay, they were harassing people for donor money. Harassing people for donor money. And I remember telling Mr. President that these people were going to put you in trouble. I was not surprised when the United States government had to sanction the chief of staff to the president because they felt everyone working in government was somehow into clicky-body and diddy-body or corruption or something like that. So when the US government said corruption is pervasive, they are asking investors for money, I had to resign to protect my integrity. That's why I went to President Weah and gave him a letter of resignation. I was leaving and I left the government. And I'm not surprised everything that the whole world is saying happening to Liberia today. And this is why they don't deserve a second term.
Thank you. I will bring in Mrs. Letty Brooks Roberts. Mrs. Roberts, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dr. Niswa, for coming to Bridge Radio Africa. I don't know what happened. My video is not showing, but I put my picture back up. I just want to say thank you for your service or services to Liberia. We know that according to the CDC, Ebola is transmitted through bush meat or human contact and stuff such as that. Recently we saw I don't know if it was a whale or something show up on the beaches of Liberia, and Liberians are going in and cutting up on this animal and eating it. What best practices has been put in place to prevent citizens from eating unfamiliar meat such as bush meat? I mean, we know how people hunt and stuff like that, but some things just you can tell they don't look, healthy for your consumption. So, what best practices have been put in place by your standards as one of the assistant ministers to prevent or to make our people aware not to do such things?
And thank you. That's a great question, Madam. The first thing that we did was we reviewed the National Health Plan of Liberia for 2015 in the middle of the Ebola outbreak. And we knew that there was serious gap in the healthcare system. This is why the National Public Health Institute was established by myself, leading it with other gentlemen, so that the lessons we learned from Ebola would not be erased and be used for future diseases. And we established a National Public Health Institute. My brother, Dr. Faith, were talking about whether or not we didn't have epidemiologists. After the Ebola crisis, it went we trained 300 plus field epidemiologists and deployed them in every district in Liberia. So one of the lessons we learned that Liberia did not have field epidemiologists to detect diseases and report to the national level. We put in place and trained contact tracers in the country. Liberia Reference Laboratory will upgrade from 0 testing of just 2 to 3 infectious diseases. When I left, we were testing up to 14, 15 infectious diseases, including Ebola, Lassa fever, flu diseases, COVID-19. This is where it took less than a week for Liberia to test COVID-19. Some of the systems that we put in place was now Liberia has its own Center for Disease Control that did not exist before the Ebola crisis. We train people in the Ministry of Agriculture to now test for zoonotic diseases. Zoonotic diseases means diseases that transfer from animals to human, whether it bats, monkeys, rats, and all of that. So some of those systems now are in place to look out there and do research like the U.S. Center for Disease Control is doing in every state, every territory, and every locality. So those are some of the systems that were put in place.
Thank you. Just a follow-up, Mr. Garley. So with I know, some of it's mainly animals, but with the amount of garbage that we see in the city, how does that, create another health hazard? Or are we going to wait till we get a breakout before we seize that problem?
Yeah, there are a lot of other, waterborne and foodborne diseases that are also, affecting people based on the situation that you just described. And this is why Lassa fever is also on the increase, that is transmitted by rodents, rats, and all of that. Some of the Lassa fever belt that we have now has increased from Bon, Mima, Lofa, now Magibi, Monserrado, and other two areas are having Lassa fever. So yes, that can contribute to some of these waterborne and foodborne diseases. This is why a lot of typhoid and all of those diseases are giving people help.
Thank you.
So much.
At this time, ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, this is ASHFORD GARLEY Live on British Radio Africa. This program comes your way Mondays and Tuesdays on British Radio Africa. A couple of suggestions out there that this particular topic needs another show. And aspect the suggestion of Dr. Yusa, if the times are right, who am I? This is your platform, and you are always welcome to set up a date where we can come and exclusively talk about the epidemic. But
And all of these are well detailed in my book.
I know. And speaking of the book, Collapse and Resiliency, the inside story of Liberia's unprecedented Ebola response. Tell us about the book, and we'll whip ourselves around the room and get some questioning for you.
Yeah, so the book is being published right now.
ASHFORD, no. Sorry, Dr. Nusra.
Please do not interrupt the guest.
No, I'm just asking. We were coming in before you go to another topic.
For your piece, let the guest respond, and then we'll get back to you, sir. Thank you.
All right.
So the book is in twofold. First, when we got the thought of, in fact, I'm thankful to Madam Sally for writing the foreword of the book, in fact. When we thought of that, was only to write the Ebola story, but then my own autobiography came in. So, my entire life story from birth to where I am today is part of the book. You will read about who I am, my beginning, and a couple of chapters in the book talk about how Ebola came about, what happened, the inside story, some of the questions that Dr. Fig were asking about, where the ministers were in the initial stages, all of that is documented in the book. How Liberian took the Ebola virus disease to Nigeria is documented. How the United States military went in. I also compare Liberia's experience, how that experience helped other countries like the United States, and who were the main actors. I know people are parading in Liberia of being Ebola heroes and all of that. In the book, you will know who are the main actors, the entire organogram of how the Ebola response went on, and healthcare workers that got affected, about 192 of them, including doctors that died, and what kind of support came to Liberia and who gave that support. All of that are spelled out in the book with my co-author of the book, Dr. Amadia Stone, who was working with me as a personal technical advisor from the World Health Organization. They both of us authored the book, and it's been published by the Johns Hopkins University. Laymen can read it. It's also there for university students, people doing their masters, doctors, professors have already started signing it. You can get it on Amazon. Collapse and Resiliency. Collapse and Resiliency meaning the health system got collapsed from one disease, but then after a while, we were able to build a resilient healthcare system that now can withstand some of the shocks of Ebola and other infectious diseases.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Yunsua. So tell us about the cost of the book.
It's about $34 to $35.
Okay.
You can,
Okay.
you can pre-order now, and I'm expecting the author's copy in the mail in the next couple of days.
Okay. Thank you so much. At this time, we want to revisit our panelists. Perhaps they have something for you. The Reverend Dr. George. Dr. George.
Reverend George. Okay, you see, Ashford, we come on this show because we want to contribute to Liberia, and I think we deserve equal opportunity time. I want to thank Dr. Nyeswa for, again, his immense contribution to Liberia. But I also want to caution Dr. Nyeswa that he fell into the trap of Idatu, Reverend Idatus, to find a way to praise Joseph Nyima Bwaka, who told the Liberian people that he was parked for 12 years. So now here we are. They found a scenario to give Joseph Nyima Bwaka 90%. And that's why Dr. Fix had serious problem with that, which I do. Okay, here we are. Dr. Nyeswa, with all due respect to your contribution to Liberia, Dr. Fix was saying, try to prosecute the case that, look, Ebola started in other parts of Africa before it reached Liberia. Nothing was put in place for prevention. And it came to Liberia. They didn't just jump from the sky and come to Liberia. In as much as you got the excellent job for you to come here and give Joseph Nyima Bwaka 90% for disease that could have been contained, I take serious exception. But here are your words. When it came to COVID-19, Mr. Alexander Benedict Cummings called you, technocrat. As a technocrat, he called you, asked you for a plan. Let the Liberian people hear me. He asked you for a plan. What can we do to mitigate, to lessen the deaths of COVID-19 on our fellow compatriots? And you gave him a 7-point plan that he implemented and came back to you with honesty. Yes, a man who was not serving in government, but you had all the ministers serving in government. You had a vice president who was asleep for 12 years, and all of them were there, and Ebola came upon the country. And then you came here and fell into the trap of Mr. Reverend Datu to push you to praise Joseph Nyima Bwaka because they cannot find anything in his record other than to take a Liberian professional to use it. Let me ask you a straightforward question, Dr. Nyeswa. Assuming Joseph Bwaka took the helm of power, he calls you to become health minister. Will you accept it?
Now, this is the issue. Let me put it this way. You understand? I said professional will thrive under good leadership, right? I'm not here for position in Liberia. I left Liberia with my family, and we now settle in the United States. I'm working in the US and working around the world. I believe Liberia needs leadership, and for now, let's deal with the situation that we have at hand. The major situation we have at hand is for Liberia to have a good leadership. I know I have appeared on other stations before coming the British Radio Africa, and thank ASHFORD GARLEY for having me here. And have stated I'm on record. I will say the same thing here. I've told you how I work very closely with His Excellency the Ambassador and catalog what he has achieved over the years. I told you also my experience with Mr. Cummings. I believe he can be a good president. Mr. Tiawon Gonglo was president of the Liberian National Bar Association when I was president of the Sano County Bar Association. By extension, the both of us work on the executive committee of the Bar Association. He's another credible, fine Liberian. Sarah Beslo Yanti, who has been an international civil servant, as well as worked in Liberia in the health sector when she was program manager for the HIV program. I was deputy program manager for the malaria program, who raised millions and millions of dollars from the Global Fund to support some of the work that happened in the health sector over the years. So there are great people in the race. Don't get me wrong. I didn't come here as a spokesperson for the ambassador, but when somebody does something that is concrete and you see leadership in them, you must say that.
Thank you, Doctor.
I have worked with him. He's credible. He can be a great leader to transform our country. And so Nigeria elect him I think he will do a great job.
Thank you, Dr. Yunsua and Idatus will come in. But what they are saying is this is a man who said he was a parked race car in the garage for 12 years. His hands were tied. And they are saying 90 plus. You giving the man A plus. They're saying the scores are too high. Dr. Yunsua, that's what they're saying.
I'm very conservative because I taught universities before I left Liberia. I taught the medical school, medical jurisprudence. I taught Cottington University. I'm very, very much conservative of giving grades. And people who have known me and worked with me, ask in Liberia, they know how technical I am, and I'm results-based. If Mr. Boaka was not the character that I said he is, I will come on the show and let you know without any hesitation because I need nothing from him, absolutely. I'm okay. I'm not looking for a job. And so I can tell you, Ashford, he deserved 90% from the work that I have done with him, how meticulous he was, how critical he was, how detailed he was, and how he did things very well. I think people are looking at him and taking him out of context, that he was a parked car. Let me give you another story that will intrigue you about Ambassador Boaka. The Lofa Road you see today, in 2014, and give me a couple of seconds or a few minutes. The Lofa Road you see today, that people are boasting of the Banga to Menikoman Road. Minister Augustine Kafuan, former finance minister, told me a story that the design drawing for the Banga to Menikoman Lofa Road was first done by President William R. Todbert Jr., who my father named me after a first name because of a love for President Todbert. That is in my book as well. And that plan for that Lofa Road was drawn by President Todbert. Joseph Nyoman Boaka, His Excellency, got a copy of that plan and kept it for that long and took it to President Sirleaf according to Minister Kafuan. That road plan was taken to President Sirleaf, and when they were talking about building roads and people quit to forget, I was living on the old road. To leave the old road to go to Broad Street, Rain Light to Broad Street, EAW to Broad Street was impossible when 2006, when President Sirleaf took over. So they were discussing road work and how to develop the roads in Liberia. President Sirleaf took that plan that Joseph Boaka had presented to President Sirleaf about the Lofa Road, according to Kafuan.
Please land.
And that road, that plan was what Minister Kafuan used to raise the money from the Badia Fund, as they call it, Kuwaiti Fund, and sign that agreement that brought the money to face that road. So somebody like that has love for the country.
Thank you, Dr. Yunsua.
Love for the country. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Yunsua. Thank you, Dr. Yunsua.
Not out of politics.
Thank you. Reverend Idatus Ade.
You know, Ashford, it's rather unfortunate that there is this culture when a patriotic Liberian speaks to the credibility of people who have committed their lives to the nation, such as, Dr. Yunsua and the Honorable Joseph Boaka. Then there is this motive of whether or not he wants a job. There is a Liberian who has given his life to his country at the fulcrum of Ebola, who is currently settled in these United States. And, all he has to do is to give back to his country. So he stands nothing to benefit by coming to speaking to the facts of Mr. Joseph Boaka experience. It is rather unfortunate that the mediocrity of our politics tend to impugn the character of people, that they aren't truthful people when it comes to politics that can just speak facts to a person's character. If we brought anybody from Coca-Cola to talk about Mr. Cummings' experiences and contribution, if they said that, should one conclude that this person is looking for a job in Mr. Cummings' government? Should he become president of Liberia? I think that is just uncalled for. We have a Liberian who sacrificed his life, his wisdom and education, his commitment. When we were in America, he was on the ground, who understands infectious disease and control. And we were here trying to debate him at the level which, quite frankly, I just don't understand. When you look at Ebola alone, it got 6 different strains of viruses, 6 different variants of Ebola. So you were saying why Liberia didn't catch it. Juxtapose that question to the great United States. Ebola hit America in spite of all of its sophistication.
They were panicking.
COVID hit China in spite of China's sophistication. COVID hit America in spite of all of the epidemiologists they had here. So why are you trying to impugn Liberia, who is yet trying to rebuild after war? Its infrastructure was completely devastated. So let's give some credibility where credibility is due.
Thank
He
you.
didn't come here to politicize anything. I don't know Dr. Yin Swan. It's my first time in person interviewing him. So if I want to start
Thank you, Sonny.
insinuating that he's in this for money, that's not true. The
Thank you,
Park
Dr.
race car certainly did what he needed to do and recognized that he could have done more. The oxymoron of a
Your
Park
time
race
is
car is
up,
to let you
Reverend
know that if
Addy.
this sleeper wakes up,
Much.
he will do more for Liberia. But let's not politicize this thing.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Reverend. Thank you so much. I'll bring in Dr. Fisk. Please unmute your device, Doc.
Yeah, thank you, Ashford. So the thing is, when Dr. Yusua talked about being conservative, he knows very well that whatever terminology he's using is relative and situational. So don't do that to the public. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, I don't stoop low. Okay. Because before becoming a health professional, I worked as a reporter, a journalist. Okay. One of my degrees, my early degrees, was in political science and history. The discipline of history requires that you go after facts. You don't go after emotions. Okay. The doctor says something very specific, and I try to respond to it. Is one thing I would definitely praise him for the immense for stopping the death. Okay. But I will also say that 3,000 death was unnecessary because why? It's not as if to say people didn't have academic, they had not pursued academia. They had. Okay. And the research was there. Ebola did not even, it had 50 strands of Ebola. The research, it just tells you that the research is there. People were just flat footed. And as far as epidemiology is concerned, there are different concepts, okay, that explains a lot, which Dr. Yiswa understands. Okay. And I may not be an epidemiologist, but I can better prepare and come to have a more substantive discussion on this issue because I know my topic and I know the facts. Okay. So all I'm saying is that why is it important that we're able to avert a complete catastrophe? We can't go back and now and say, okay, well, let's give Joseph Boyka over 90% because I'm conservative in grading. No, conservative is situational. Okay. Thank you.
Doc,
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll give you 2 minutes to respond. Then we'll go to Mrs. Lectable Roberts. Then we'll begin taking closing statements. Go
Dr.
ahead.
Fake, thank you very much. And I wouldn't dignify 4,000 people dying. About 50 million people died from COVID-19 globally. Nobody will ever, laugh about that. Is even one Liberian dying from a disease is unacceptable. However, when there's an outbreak of a disease, human beings are the one that die. I remember going to the meeting with President Sirleaf, and she was very mad and wanted the situation under control. Politicians were asking for her resignation, that the government was not doing anything with the Ebola crisis. And she was on our backs about getting the situation under control. And I remember telling her, Madam President, if there's a chicken sickness, chickens die. This is a health human sickness. Liberian, unfortunately, will die, but Madam President, trust me, we will put it under control. And within 3 months, when I took the helm of the outbreak in August of 2014, by September, we bent the epidemiological curve, and Liberians started taking steps to stop the outbreak. But I can surely tell you that His Excellency, the Vice President, was on the side of the president to bring the situation under control. You need a steady hand like that through a crisis. We have a drug crisis in the country where it's putting an existential threat to Liberians with the push and everything that's taking place, the catastrophe with illicit drugs in our country that is tied to transnational organized crime, narcotics trafficking, money laundering, trafficking in persons, increase in HIV and AIDS and virus hepatitis due to the drug crisis in our country. And you have not heard the leadership of our country to do that. people who are suspects of the drugs and carrying it to our country are absconding from the country. We need a justice system to do something about that.
Thank you, Dad.
Do them so that we curb the drug situation, which has a social, economic, health, and mental health impact of drugs. Those are the issues for me that concern me, you know.
Thank you. We want to bring in Mrs. Letty Brooks. You see, we want to extend the program, but we don't have the time. But you know, everything costs money. You got the Cash App and Zelle on there. Just show me that you want us to continue the discussion by visiting the Cash App and Zelle, and of course we'll continue to the next 1 hour. Okay, Mrs. Letty Brooks Roberts, your response. Following your response, we will begin with closing statements. Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Garley, and thank you again to my fellow panelists. For me, I've listened to, I got a briefing of one of his interviews on another station, and I heard him say that he didn't want to be political. However, he was, he stated, as he's done here, few of the actors such as Mr. Cummins, Mr. Boykai, Mr. Gonglo, who were instrumental in different ways in the Liberian crisis. But he was pushed against the wall, and he became political by, siding with Mr. Boykai. And now today I hear him elaborating on, why he thinks Mr. Boykai, did great or whatever. But I think you did a great job doing your tenure, and I feel that you shouldn't be caught up. If you want to be on Boykai's side, I think you should be on Boykai's side rather than just praise few people and then take another side because someone pressures you into saying that. And I was very appalled at that because I listened to the show and the person even started speaking in his dialect, and then you did the same. And then when you said Boykai, he cut you off and said that was it. You couldn't say anything more. I feel you should stand for your convictions and not be caught up in such, and again, it's your free will to support who you want. But I felt that was a little, disingenuous. But thank you. Did you guys get me?
ASHFORD, can I?
Yeah. Dr. Yunus, Dr. Yunus respond to her,
Yes,
and then
madam, thank you.
listen, folks, listen, Doc. Following his response, we will take a few calls, okay, and then you guys can come. I was just asked by my boss to extend the show, to 2 hours, so we'll stay here a little longer. Go ahead, Doc.
So thank you, Madam Roberts, for your advice. And my inclination is not. There's no motivation for anybody to push me. No, I'm one person who have gone through some very, very tough time from childhood. I'm very direct of what I want to do. I'm very clear because anything I do and say and put my weight behind is based on facts. As a lawyer, I believe in the facts, the evidence, and apply the law. As a scientist, I go by the data and also by the evidence to make decisions. I'm on this show for the sake of the Liberian people to tell them that the extrajudicial killing is too much. The drug war on our country is destroying our country. The corruption that they put in sanction on Liberia is not in the right direction. Those are the things that motivating me as a Liberian to come forward and say Liberia deserves better. And there is no way, no one can pressure me to do what I don't want to do or what I'm supposed to do. I'm speaking from a very free mind.
I'm not sure whether you answered a direct question from Reverend George that if you were appointed under the Joseph Boykai's government as the health minister, would you take the assignment?
It's not an issue right now. For me, it's not important. It's completely not important. Okay. What is important right now is to fix what we're going up to by October 10th. That's the most critical part of that. Where I will be after October 10th, it doesn't bother me at all. So it's not something I want to get involved in. What I want to get involved in right now is let's stop the drugs trafficking the inept leadership that is in our country in place right now, we have the window of opportunity, short window of opportunity for 14 days. That
Thank you.
window of opportunity will close anytime soon. We need to
Thank
close that window of opportunity.
Thank you, that. With that, I think it is fair for us to.
Individually, I'm okay. As for you know, I'm okay.
I know that, but I asked you a question, you gave me a political answer, but it's okay. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, we want to take a few calls, and the number to call is 267 248 5295. And I believe we'll have a caller on the line from Chicago. Hello, caller, tell us your name.
Yes, good evening. My name is Ebenezer Momosai Jr. This is my first time calling on the radio. And I'm a silent listener, you know. My boss, I call him my boss. He's never formal to me. I call because my boss is on the phone, is on his studio today. Uh, DG, that's how we call him, Director General, Robert G. Niswa. The G there stands for Jiwule. And I drove him during the Ebola up to his departure from Liberia. I was his driver. They think Ebola that the chief is explaining over there. You know, when you leave from the battlefield and you're telling people how the battlefield left, sometimes people laugh because they are not there or they were not there. It was not an easy thing that we went through. I remember when sometimes we enter the butchers where we have to go and see workers, how they feel. When you see some of the workers, the health workers, already going in their grave. And when I look at him, how he looked, I remember him asking, I remember asking him, Chief, I mean, how possible is this as disease can come and just take human lives like that? Because for me, I'm not a health practitioner. I was by then, I'm going to the University of Liberia. I got a degree in public administration, BBA degree in public administration. In fact, he was the very person who helped me in our job. But another story, different story, different day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for calling.
Thank you, General, for your service. Thank
But
you.
that was your driver back then when you served Liberia.
Yes.
Well, we'll have another call on the line. The last four digits of your number, 7242. Please tell us your name.
Are you getting me, Mr. Garland?
You're live. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This is Elvis from Minnesota. Look, Dr. Yensua, thank you so much for your service to our country. Your resume is impressive, very impressive. But I think it's fair for those of us who are supporting political parties like you yourself, you're picking a side. I just want to ask you, when Liberia did so well, as you stated in your presentation during the COVID-19, was that because there was good leadership at the time, or just the technocrats was just so great that the leadership didn't matter at the time? Because if I remember, President Weah was the president of the country during that time. Mr. God, I'll leave it in.
Okay, thank you. We'll have Mr. Herbert Face, my national security professional.
Oh, hi, Ashford. The only thing I want to say is, Doctor, thank you for your service, but giving Mr. Boyka that mark, I think is too high because if we talk about, according to you, you said you guys had two epidemiologists in Liberia at the time during the outbreak, granted. Well, my thing is, if you had two and you had the incubation period, okay, which you people develop symptoms and stuff like that, that can range from a week to an hour, stuff like that, okay. So I think they had enough time to contain the disease before we had that amount of death in Liberia. So all I'm saying is I think the 90%, I just think it's too high, because I think Boyka and Ellen should have done a much better job. That's one, two. I heard you speak about the drug problem in Liberia. The only way we can fix the drug problem in Liberia, we have to fix the judicial system. You understand? Because the criminal justice system and the judicial system have to go hand in hand. And we know that they're very corrupt. You understand? So whoever that becomes president, that's something they will have to really, really work on. Thank you, Ashford.
Thank you. At this time, we want to go back to Dr. Yunsua to give us his closing statement as we go home tonight. Doc?
So thank you for the call-outs, and especially Mr. Ebenezer Momo said, I don't let to call him my brother anymore. We are colleagues now, and I used to even call him my colleagues when we were working together back home. JR, thanks for the call. Someone spoke about the leadership of the country with COVID-19. Liberia did well because of the foundation that was built. I can quote the current Minister of Health. I remember she went to the talk show once at the Ministry of Information and said the system that the past administration, Dr. Dan Tobo-Niswa then put in place, that's what we are standing on today, and we are able to respond to the outbreak. So government is continuative. We are excited that what we were able to do and put in place, we did not leave Liberia with no system. The building of the Public Health Institute and other systems that I spoke about helped the country to deal with the COVID-19 crisis. And there were leadership that were in place that did that. But trust me, if we didn't put that system in place for others to use, we wouldn't have had the situation of continuing the COVID-19 outbreak in the African region. And the incubation period of Ebola was 2 to 21 days. But as I said, the region and the world were caught, pens down with the Ebola situation. And the way Liberia, though Liberia was the epicenter and mostly affected among the three most affected countries, Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. But President Sirleaf is hailed today around the world because of her leadership with the Ebola crisis. You remember when Ebola got over, the call her at the White House. As we speak today, she and Ellen Clark, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, our president, Mrs. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, is now the head of the pandemic independent panel of experts in the world. You can Google everything I say. You can Google is online for her work in dealing with the Ebola crisis in the sub-region. And so, Ashford, to conclude, Liberia is in trouble. I didn't come here to defend one political party. I have not joined any political party in my life before. I did not come here as a spokesperson for one politician. I came here to state the facts and nothing but the facts. The fact that I have worked 20 years. I left October 2019 when I resigned from the government after spending 22 months. I can give you during what happened during the Taylor administration in the sector that I've worked in, what happened when President Sirleaf took over, what happened when Mr. Ware took over in 2018, and the indicators. All of the indicators are bad today in Liberia. Corruption, we have gone down in the International Index for Corruption. Check it up. Liberia GNP and per capita income for people is a problem in the country. The support to the health sector, the U.S. ambassador, and let me quote this from the U.S. ambassador in April 2023. He said, unfortunately, on the trip I was started and led and deeply troubled to encounter multiple government hospitals that received not one penny of which they were promised in the 2022 budget. Hospitals on which lives depend, where outbreaks are prevented and suffering is alleviated, did not receive any portion of the 100,000 or more appropriated by the legislature for them to operate. The United States government is about to spend a total of over $40 million constructing Liberia's state-of-the-art national reference laboratory that when completed will require $3 million a year from the government to operate. If the government is failing to deliver statutory appropriation of only 100,000 to existing hospitals, why will we ever trust annual pledge of 3 million for the future
Well,
national
thank you.
laboratory? After that, that fund he's talking about, I raised it. I'm standing here, I raised it from the US government to start constructing the state-of-the-art National Public Health Reference Laboratory and the Public Health Institute of Liberia. Ask my brother, he can call back and tell you. But today, that project is abandoned by the CDC government. That's how you get frustrated when you are a technician. Thank you for having me.
Great, and Dr. Yunuswa, we look forward to seeing you come back again, even though you didn't tell us whether or not you will take up the Minnesota Health position, but we'll leave it at that. We're hoping that the best person wins as we go to these elections on October.
Ashford,
On
can we
October.
give him an opportunity to also grade Cummings because you graded Waka?
Yeah,
Tell us
exactly.
a grade for Cummings.
And Dr. Yunuswa, that's correct. And before you leave, my boss just authorized me to stay a little longer. So with that, I want you to please talk about grading other candidates, and I want you to also talk about the drug epidemic in our country.
Oh, so you want me to stay for another time?
Yeah, just a little, or 5-10 minutes. I want you to answer, grade other political leaders as well. That's what he's asking.
I told you grading people based on MAE, monitoring evaluation, based on indicators. I stated several reasons as a conservative person why I rated the Ambassador, His Excellency, the 90% that I gave him based on his leadership. I gave you one experience, Mr. Comey. I think he will be a good president. I also gave you experience with Mr. Gonglo with integrity and all of that of the National Bar. I told you about Sarah Beslow Yanti, young guy, Clarence, who worked for the president's PDU and all of that. So for me to put grade to them, it means I have done a lot of indicators and all of that to put a grade to the rest of them. But I think they would be better if you compare them with Mr. Weah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, at this time, I want to whip myself around the room again, and guess who is anxiously waiting to just say something and attempt to tear our guest apart because he feels that 90% is way too high for Ambassador Boycott. Reverend George.
No, really, thank you. Actually, I have a great deal of respect for our guest because of his immense contribution to Liberia. And I mean, for any Liberian for that matter, including Dr. Yinswa today and Mr. Cummings, who I support from the CPP, who is internationally acclaimed to have made Liberia proud. Okay. I think to go back to the question that Dr. Fix wanted to ask about grading Mr. Cummings, I thank God that Dr. Nyeswa, from my introducing Mr. Cummings about Ebola, was compelled to say something. And what he really unveiled to this platform and the listening audience was this. During the COVID-19, Mr. Cummings, as a manager now, I'm from the field manager. Managers work through people, right? Mr. Cummings, looking at the devastation of COVID, reached out to a technocrat and said, give me a plan. He was not leading any government. That's how he loves Liberia.
That's a fact.
Give me thank you. Give me a plan and I will put it to use. I will put my own money behind it. And Dr. Nyeswa, to his admission, gave Mr. Cummings a 7-point plan that was implemented. Now, I speak to the Liberian people. In addition to this, the STEM school that you have in Liberia, now the first of its kind in West Africa, and all of Mr. Cummings' contribution to whether the BWI, Continental University College, Zion, the University of Liberia, this guy is the one they are saying he has not worked in government. He has not stolen money from government. But what he did, he brought his money back to Liberia. And Dr. Nyeso, I just testified to it. Thank you very much. And this is why Mr. Cummings deserves a grade, Dr. Nyeso.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. As we close, Idatu's added, take that too.
Is this a closing statement?
Yes.
Closing statement starting now.
Okay. So my fellow Liberians, I first of all want to acknowledge and certainly commend Dr. Yinswa for his indefatigable service to our country. I certainly thank you personally. And, do not hold back. It is my hope that one of these days, if your country calls you back, there will be a consultation with your family to go back and serve. And let nobody indict you for your willingness to serve your country, irrespective of who becomes president. They were asking you to grade Mr. Cummings, but Mr. Cummings clearly states that the past performance is the best indicator for future performance. And they're forcing you to give him a grade when in fact you have not been through an M&E with him. But the truth is, you stated that Mr. Cummings did ask you for a plan. Should I conclude that you want to work in the Mr. Cummings government because you told the facts about your experience with Mr. Cummings? Absolutely not. But this is the political aspirations of those who are often intending to impugn people's character when they speak truth to power or the facts about people's personalities and experience. I'm not thinking that you are praising Mr. Cummings for asking for a plan because you want to work in his government. Why are they thinking because you spoke facts concerning the Honorable Joseph Boyka, that means you want a job? The Bible says a prophet is not respected in his own home. Today I salute you. And please, if your country calls on you, irrespective of politics, I would hope you would go back and serve and not feel afraid that people will think you're political. Liberia is at a crucial state. The drug infestation, proliferation of ghettos, the selling of our passports, the international disrepute we find ourselves in under this, our President George Manuel Weah, absolutely calls for a change. And the change must happen in the personality of someone who has a past performance against this present failure as a future indicator for a greater performance. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother.
Joseph Imam Boyka, vote number 2.
Mrs. Roberts, as we close tonight, give us 2, please.
Yes, thank you to Ms. Dr. Niswa, and thank you to our viewing audience. Thank you to our panelists. Please do support Bridge Radio Africa, as we are an independent broadcaster. So please support us however you can. The Cash App is posted. Thank you, Mr. Niswa. For me, when I stated what I stated, it wasn't to indict you for if you were to be asked, yes, do come and work for whichever government wins, because that's what we need, qualified people to serve our country. One of the issues we have currently is just putting people there because of who you know and not what they know. So I have no problem. I just felt insulted that you fell into the play of that person, and you do know who I'm talking about. To our Liberian people, please vote for your choice. You have a open field of people that have told you what they can do for you. Like I said yesterday, it's about the economy, immigration, extrajudicial killings, and you name it, the healthcare, education. Where do you go? Where do we stand right now if you were to compete with your peers in another country, will you be able to? Think about that, and not just for today. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful evening.
And I will allow Dr. Yunso to have the last word before we close tonight. So, Dr. Fisk, closing, please.
Okay, thank you, Ashford, once more. Okay, so whenever someone at the doctoral level, whenever you do an analysis, there's a framework of analysis. Okay, so I'm just wanting to understand what is the framework of analysis that Dr. Yinswa used to grade Mr. Boyka 90%. You know very well that we use tools of analysis. Okay, so I'm yet to understand that, because if you tell me what the tool is, we want to know whether that tool has been peer reviewed. You know those things. Okay, so that's one. Let's talk about Ellen. You say, oh, how Ellen was angry. Anyone who's worked in the corridors of government knows very well that when the ministers meet with the president at a cabinet level, they are there to seek the president's guidance, and the president is in the position to give directive. That's the kind of interchange between ministers of government and the president. So in other words, the president should be informed by the ministers and then provide additional information based on the people that she got working with her. What you've just said tonight is that whole thing wasn't working well. Okay, we as far as I'm concerned, we know very well that this Ebola thing was not new to Africa, whether there were numerous strains or whatever. If we were diligent towards our own people, we wouldn't have significant amounts of people dying before the international community would have come in to provide the kind of impetus that then led the Eden government to do well by her own people. What this shows is that at the end of the day, it's not just sufficient to just say, oh, well, this person has experience. Ellie has had a lot of experience, but look at how she blundered. And whenever the West come and give you accolade, I'm not impressed by that. Because why? They don't feel they have a stake in Africa. If it was in Western country, they would do better. Thank you.
The Reverend George, your closing statement, sir.
Thank you. And again, once again, Dr. Nyeso, I really admire your work. Thank you so much for taking up your time again to share with us. But also, I do like to close on this. I always want to speak to the voters, okay? And I won't let this go. Dr. Nyeso just gave an insight of what a coming presidency will be. This guy was not in the government, but he saw his fellow compatriots were at danger when it comes to COVID-19. He reached out to an expert. I am telling you, this is why we need a managerial leadership for Liberia. That's what managers do. We work through people. And to close on this, the stakes are too high in this election. We have the representative of the past, Joseph Nyema Boakai. 12 years he slept, and unfortunately, Dr. Yinswa gave him 90% only on one stream of activity, Ebola. Very sad. And he represents the past. George Weah, we know it's a Zogo administration. We wanted gone long time ago. They will go. We're asking the Liberian people again. Thank you, Dr. Face. Gave him a red card at the ballot. The only choice we're left with now is that we cannot replace the dismal presence with the failed pass of Joseph Nyema Boakai for 12 years with Ellen Johnson, who makes the opportunity to set a chance of a pre-war Liberian system. This is why we need Mr. Alexander Cummings, who has a plan, who has articulated his plan, who is willing to go after weeks in government day one, who is willing, who was not in government but was contributing. When you go to the polls, do not replace this dismal failure with the failed pass of Joseph Boakai. Elect, vote number 4, and let's put Mr. Cummings, who will reach out to Dr. Nyeso and all of our technocrats to build Liberia. Thank you very much, Doctor. We would always like to have you. Your insights are very prolific. And thank you, Dr. ASHFORD GARLEY, Doctor, for bringing our guest who is very informed. But vote number 4, managers work through people. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Yinswa, again, we have the last 30 seconds to close us out. Let's go home tonight.
Again, thank you, folks. People are entitled to their own opinions, but not their own facts. I know that for sure. So, again, my book will be a very good book that I can recommend to you, Dr. Faith. It will give you very good, clear insight. You can get a copy of that and you will understand, and then we can have ASHFORD can give you my contact. We can have further discussions on some of the issues that you raised. And I believe that before I leave, let me talk about the National Election Commission and in my few seconds, and what I feel about the commissioner and the board of commission. They are in a situation that they are afraid of someone, and I want to encourage them. Like I spoke the last time, they started a press briefing. I think I started with that. The election commission to give a daily press briefing within the next 14 days remaining for the elections, to give people information about what's taking place in the country. As we see now, a rate of my diamonds have been filed to the Supreme Court. Political actors should not go through that kind of thing to give common information of final voter rolls verification and all of that for people to go to court for what when we have not even started the election itself. So the election commission should be robust, proactive, give information to the public to dispel misinformation, disinformation, and rumors. Mr. Ware, let me speak directly to the president. You do not politicize everything. The drug war on our country need to be declared as an epidemic of illicit drugs that are killing people in our country. I believe there are clandestine laboratories that are in the country that are using precursor chemicals to make those illicit drugs that are killing the young people in the country.
Thank you,
if
Dad.
Politicians are putting pressure on you about the drugs in the country, you as a government should have the political will, investigate impartially and bring people to books based on our new drug laws and hold people accountable at the highest level of the government. Otherwise, the civil war that killed 250,000 people will be even small when Liberians start dying in their numbers from drug infestation and narcotics and be a pariah state because of drug use. Thank you, Astor, for having me.
Thank you. And folks, with that, that's how we come to the end of this week's edition of the program Ashford Garley Live. God willing, we will be back on Monday of next week and Tuesday of next week, except something uh, dramatically happen, and then we'll have a special edition of the show. We want to say the big thanks to our lovely and informed panelists. We also want to say the big thanks to our guests, very knowledgeable guests on 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 the issues and health issues in the country. Want to say the big thanks to our viewers, our listeners, those who took the time to be part of the show tonight. We just want to say
As for sorry, someone were asking. I saw someone asking my background. I'm a doctor in public health. I'm a lawyer, counselor of law before the Supreme Court. I have 20 years of career in public health in various positions in infectious disease and epidemiology.
and I want to say a big thanks also to my boss. She asked that we extend the time to 2 hours tonight. With that said, folks,
Thanks to her.
yeah, please allow me to borrow the words of the wise man. Tough times don't last, tough people do. The heart of a man is never known until he rises because there's no second chance to make that first impression. Don't see okra and swallow bone because you can't hide your naked there from bathing bucket. When God bless you, don't see that medicine. And what people think about you and the possibility of your dream is none of your business. Some call him the mastermind, the doctor of law, Africa's media doobie doo extraordinaire. You know, sit to buy you get Zebon Plo that Nadia Quame G, the now you know being garland. Have a good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.